Jagathi. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm so glad to be here.
I am excited too. Yes, it's been something we've been talking about for such a long time.
Yes, we did.
Well, it feels like a long time, probably several months now. But we've been talking about the fact that you and I get very excited by all the new technology and how it affects business. And how can we share this excitement and potential of technology with everybody else? So we took a proposal, and you should probably tell the story. We took a proposal
Well,
to...
we are members of the Boston Club.
That's true.
It's a very prominent organization. We're very happy to be members of that club. And one of the reasons why we wanted to share it is because we thought that that would be a great opportunity for women to be aware of the disruptive technologies that are coming up into our lives. So that's why we're here.
We're here, yes. So I think one of the early conversations you and I had is, what is digital? Why digital? Why should we bother about this? Of course, you and I had the answers for it too, even though we came from two different backgrounds. But I think even before we talk about that, I forgot about this. We should probably step back and introduce ourselves.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Why don't you go first?
So, my name is Irina Agoulnik, and I'm with Boston Club almost for a year. My background primarily in interdisciplinary cross-functional research initiatives. I have training and experience working in different organizations, so pharmaceutical biotech, also at hospitals, but primarily on healthcare or biomedical research initiatives. From a management point of view and from research and management point of view. So that's where my background's coming from. But most recently, I was leading a technology platform, a company, and before that, I was part of their startup company that also was working on a knowledge base for diabetes treatment and prediction of their outcomes. So that gave me a lot of thought and inspiration for my future career path. So here I am. I'm excited talking about disruptive technologies, and I will be happy to provide you with some examples from healthcare and biotech.
Yeah. Yes, and I think when you said all of this, I was nodding my head quite a bit because Irina, I call you alternately, by the way, just for everybody else that's listening. I call you alternately Irina, and everything in between. But you have told me that it's perfectly fine.
Yes.
So my name is Jagathi Gururajan. I'm also a Boston Club member, and when Irina and I started talking initially about this, what we realized is I come from a different vertical. Most recently, my experience has been in financial services. I have worked across a little bit in my career with healthcare and life sciences, and also with retail and a few other industries, but dominantly financial services in the recent years. And it didn't matter where we were coming from, the way the new wave of technologies are being used are very similar across verticals. And we know that it's going to disrupt. We keep using the word disrupt, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in some time.
Yes.
It is definitely going to change how we do business, how we live our lives, and to your point from a few minutes ago, society as well. So we wanted to share all of this information with our friends in the Boston Club, and that then got into this idea where we decided to do this series of conversations amongst ourselves, because we have so much to share and ask each other, as well as bring in some of our other colleagues and business associates.
And
experts, that's true, across verticals, to talk about what technology is doing in their world professionally, and share that with everybody. The idea of sharing it with others is, I think in one way it is to inform, right, and build awareness. What do you think?
I think it's build awareness mostly, because let's be honest, even when you're going to the store, and we as women going shopping to Whole Foods, when you see this sign, Alexa, add avocados to my list, how do you understand that? Yeah. I'm sure most of you ladies already have Alexa or Google Assistant at home, and you're talking to them. So I do have at home, I have a Google Assistant. It doesn't work here, but actually talk to my assistant very often.
Yeah.
I'm asking to play music, I'm asking about the weather, I'm asking all kind of strange questions, such as, for example, what's the distance between Earth and Moon? And I'll get the answer right away. More interestingly, this little guy or this little assistant,
Yes.
girl, and that's very good comment because they're actually gender specific. So if I'm asking,
I did not
yes, they are. So if I'm asking a question, then the answer will be in male voice. If my husband asks a question, the answer will come in female voice. So not only they recognize, understand the question and give me the answer right away, they also hear my voice and recognize me as a female and to give the answer in the male. So that's the technology, and that's just one example. And today we will be introducing several disruptive technology just as an introduction, because we have a whole bunch of interesting information for you in several other sessions. Today we just do introductions.
I think you're absolutely right, because as you were talking about Alexa, is that Alexa or Google Home?
It's a Google Home.
It's Google Home, but they all do the same thing, as we know. As you were talking about Google Home and the questions you can ask, I was mentally going through the number of different processes which translates into technologies at the back end that need to come together to actually make that happen. And like you said, we are going to be touching on a few of them today, and we might get excited and talk deeply about several of them, or but we definitely want to have very contained conversations as we bring in those experts and talk about some of this later on.
Absolutely. So let me just continue on topic about the Google Assistant and all their other technology-based events. So this is actually the technology name is chatbot. This is the chatbot. And the chatbot, they have different names: the Siri, Google Assistant, and the Cortana. And there are many more. Yeah. And also they can be called like artificial intelligence bot or something else. They have a lot of different names. But the fact of the matter is, it's basically technology is using a vast amount of information, big data.
Yeah.
And they do use the artificial intelligence and specifically machine learning, to dig into this big data and get us the answer at our request.
Right.
And then another program that will translate it either in text or audio, so that we can either see or hear that. So that's the technology we're talking about, and that's just one example.
Yeah, and I think maybe we take our audience through something that we all know in our lives, right? Because we started using these terms of big data, and what I realized more recently is people like us get it, and then there is a big chasm where there are people that have heard the terms but don't understand it. And let's see if you can bridge that for them. So I'm wearing my Fitbit.
Oh, nice. How do you use it?
Very limitedly, mostly to track my exercise and then to track how many steps I take. And I think a lot of us started using this for as a step tracker. But it does more than that, doesn't it? This was your space of expertise.
Oh, it does much more than that. But instead of going into details, characteristics of Fitbit, what I want to say is that this is the wearables. So that's the name of technology. It's the wearables.
Yeah.
And the wearable is the part of the Internet of Things, which is another name for the technology. So again, we bring in this information together and linking the terminology together, so that next time when you hear Internet of Things, it's like, oh, is it Fitbit or something else? This is just one example of how Internet of Things is used for personal wearable device.
Right, and it becomes Internet of Things because there are 2 or 3 or 4 things. So my wearable here, my Fitbit, which is a wearable, is a thing that through the internet connects to my computer or to my Google Home or to my phone, and therefore it connects to multiple things through internet, and it does a few other things. So we are oversimplifying this in many ways, but if you're listening to this, you get the idea that multiple things that are connected to the internet is the Internet of Things, just a matrix of widgets that are connected through a common communication space, which is the internet here.
Absolutely. So, Jagathi, I just wanted to bring to attention a very important fact. One of the reasons why we're talking about that and why it's become all of a sudden very important is that just a few years ago, the world came upon fourth industrial revolution. And we've heard about all the previous ones, right?
Yes.
The first one in the 18th century, it was about the steam and water power.
That's right.
And then the second one was about electricity-empowered production line manufacturing.
That's true.
Right. And then the third one in 20th century, which is just recently, that was about computer and IT.
And that is in our recent memory, right? I mean, sure.
Right.
By the time
Just
we started,
recently,
by the time we started living, we assumed electricity was something all of us received. I mean, some of us might remember brownouts and blackouts when electricity was available, but for most of us, electricity is like lifeblood, we don't think.
Yeah.
But I would imagine the true disruption for most of our generation, the Gen Xers and beyond, it is when the web technology, when the mainframe became a personal computer and we started having a computer at our desk.
Right, and that's the beginning of digital transformation. And we will talk about that later, and probably more details in a different session. But what I wanted to tell you today, just to pique your interest, is that the name of the fourth industrial revolution is quite cumbersome. So it's actually autonomous decision-making of cyber-physical systems using machine learning through cloud computing. So if you don't know what cloud computing is,
yes,
or what's their cyber-physical systems or machine learning, you have no idea what this is.
So we're giggling here because Irina told me this entire thing before, and I thought I understood it and I heard every word, but I didn't. So it is a mouthful.
It is
a mouthful. But it comes back, I guess, to the same theme that we have been talking about, which is there are so many different technologies coming together. And the other aspect that happened between the early 2000s and now is that computing power has become so cheap and available.
Yes.
Cloud computing, which you just said.
And so fast with 5G.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And cloud computing is becoming a normal way of
doing business on the cloud.
Exactly. It's
basically on the internet, and that's the translation.
That's true. And as opposed to us either saving everything on our computer, saving everything on mainframes, large amounts of information has become portable right now.
Right.
Very easily. And the power behind it is also driving this large level of change.
So interesting that you mentioned about a large amount of information. And I've heard people talking about big data.
Yes.
What do you think? What is big data? How big is big? And who has the big data? Those very easy questions, but
yes,
everybody knows about that.
But you know what? I think, again, you and I have spoken about this, but I continue to think that data is one of the three pillars, right? Along with 5G, the speed at which information is moving. Yes. And then you have the computing power, and then data is the third pillar that is actually facilitating this kind of hyper movement in technology. So what is big data? I think very soon we'll start dropping the word big and we'll just call it data or data management and such. But my sense when I kind of talk about data is the millions and trillions, and I'm sure the amount of data that is available electronically right now for any organization,
right.
No matter how large or small they are, there's a large amount of data that is available for them to manipulate and use and process and
to make a decision.
To make decisions, yes.
Educated decision based on information that's been collected by multiple sources.
That is so true.
Yeah.
That is so true.
Yeah.
And some of these, even in that context, I think when we start talking about technologies like artificial intelligence and machine learning, there still needs to be larger volumes of data. Some organizations don't have enough data in certain areas to actually run some of these technologies.
Right.
And therefore, in those cases, it's just automation. But it's, again, an elevated level of automation as opposed to what we did in the early workflows of document management
It
systems.
sounds like the whole human society, we are scaling up very quickly in digital world, in the cyber world.
Love how you said that.
Right, because we're growing digitally, and that's the cyber world. So I've read a paper, an article about the big data, and it's interesting that people do use V's as a description or characterization of big data.
Yeah.
Some of them use 4 V's, some 15 V's, some 8 V's, but I think 4 V's we all have to know because it's volume, it's the scale of the data, it's the velocity, it's the speed with which they can be processed, it's the variety of data. Because actually, in order for data to be big and belong to that category, they have to be structured, unstructured, semi-structured. They have to be coming from text or from video, from social media, from all variety of different sources.
Sure.
Then it will belong to their category of big data.
Yeah.
And then the other category, which is very important for everybody, is the veracity. And veracity is the quality. Data, because garbage in, garbage out, and if we use big data for our decision making, and
this is clean,
absolutely, absolutely.
So I think a good example of this is Amazon, because remember when we all started first buying in Amazon, it was one, if you had to feel confident that your credit card is not going to be stolen and everything else. But then now, even if you've been using it sporadically over the past 10 years, for instance. Now we don't think, not only does Amazon ship it to us in 2 days, you have to be a Prime member and all of that details, but even more than that, it seems to know when I'm ready for some of my regular purchases. It tells me, it gives me recommendations on everything from movies
and
to
how
watch.
would they know, right?
Exactly, and when you think about that, I think it identifies everything you said about the 4 V's, and they have data about me over the past 10 years of shopping. So they know personally what I like to do. They then have data from various other sources. They probably know where I live. They probably know demographic data, what my neighbors buy, because they have access to that. Exactly. And people in my town maybe, and therefore they have a picture of me there.
Digital picture, your digital twin.
That's true. That's
That's another name for technology, another disruptive technology. We're not going to talk about that today. But I think the Amazon actually, and I don't mean to interrupt you, but I think what you touch upon is very important. Amazon is actually e-commerce.
That's right.
And this is a new industry that had not existed. It did not exist at all until the disruptive technology came aboard. So
that's so fascinating, because I think one of the other reasons why we wanted to have this set of conversations, for all our friends out there that are worried that this wave of technologies is going to change your roles or may have you lose your jobs and things like that. I think what you should know is, yes, there's going to be change, but the new world is also going to require people. It's never going to be just technology or just artificial intelligence. It's always going to be technology and humans. So whether it's AI or we'll be talking about blockchain, which we have not touched on so far. Data, whatever, IoT, whatever technology we talk about is always going to be technology and human. How we interact, our roles may change, just like e-commerce brought this whole wave of new kinds of jobs for us. And other technologies, of course, along with e-commerce. The application of these technologies is probably going to open up a lot more. And critical in that would be how quickly we as individuals and professionals reskill to adapt and use. And again, what we hope from this session or this series of sessions is that you feel comfortable and confident to start adapting and adopting to these new technologies.
So I think what I wanted to do today is just quickly to tell you some examples about how the world is changing. And then after that, invite our audience to participate in our next sessions. So what is important is the world is changing. There is no doubt about that. And maybe you don't notice it right away. Maybe it's very settled and not disruptive for your life,
enough,
and then it's
Yet.
good.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
But we don't want it to be disruptive. We want you to be included in this change, to be empowered by that change, and benefit from that. But just to give you some example, for example, the World Economic Forum back in 2015, which is probably
It's
4 years ago.
Yeah, 4 years ago.
They made a prediction for the changes that will be in the world by year 2025. So it's 10 years prediction.
Yeah.
So what they said that by that year, by year 2025, 90% of the world population will own a smartphone.
I believe that.
That's easily
Yeah,
done,
that's easy,
right?
yes.
But then also they say that there will be 1 trillion sensors connected to internet. That talks about wearables.
Wow.
So people
Yes.
will be wearing sensors, whether it's for medical purposes or for exercise and physical, activities, or for any other reasons. But 1 trillion sensors. Can you
Wow.
imagine that? And then over 50% of home appliances will be connected to internet. So our homes will become smartphone homes.
Wow. So our cars, I'd imagine, our homes.
The cars will be driverless. At least 10% of them will be driverless. And they also predict that there will be cars that will be completely printed on 3D printer by year 2025. And that's another disruptive technology. We're not going to
talk about 3D
But the
printing
thing is,
today.
it just talks that basically the amount of data, the big data, is
Right.
snowballing.
Right.
The more we use technology, the more data we produce, because we're not just using, every step produces some information, and it's stored on the cloud.
And reused.
And reused.
Yeah. Yes.
And it's multiplying.
Right. And I think that's also the part that we need to be aware of as we have these conversations, which is this is not a one-stop shop. It's not we identify technology, we get some automation or change to our business from it, and it stops there. What's going to happen? Exactly. It's continually evolving because more data is collected, it refines whatever process we have, improves it, and it continues. And all of that will be automated, whether it's through the Internet of Things or any other tech.
Artificial intelligence.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I also want to mention their virtual and augmented reality. Do you have an example for
I do.
fintech?
So I think my favorite.
Because I have from healthy.
Actually, it's not even from fintech. My favorite one is Pokemon Go.
Yes.
Do you remember the game? Because everybody got crazy. Was it about a year or 18 months ago? Everybody got crazy. We'd be running on the street and we had accidents and everything else because you could. I think that is one of the best examples of augmented reality where we have real life, and then either through your phone or glasses or some other way, you're wearing something that adds on additional aspects to your reality. But the other example I have is actually still not from financial services, but heavy industry, where I've heard that they're doing whether it's the mechanic's job, right? When you're looking at automobile industry. And not just cars, but trucks and kind of heavy automobiles, heavy vehicles. Looking at those, and they're going through repairs and other activities within that. As you're doing that, use of special glasses, the use of special devices or augmentation.
Go into virtual reality.
Exactly. And I think that's interesting, really, when you think about it.
It's fascinating. I mean, the sci-fi reality of virtual
Of
reality.
course.
There's like Avatar movie.
Yes.
That's the total virtual reality. So if somebody wants to get the sense of Avatar, that's the 100% virtual reality. But it's already exists in healthcare. It's used, for example, for training physicians. So yeah, they do have. If you know, to train a physician for the surgery, they do use cadavers, right?
Yes.
Instead of that, they have now digital image of that, and they go inside and they go and they do the training using the digital virtual reality. They also use the virtual reality to prepare for very complex surgeries, operations, and so forth. And they use both the augmented reality and the virtual reality for rehab, for treatment of some mental diseases. to give you a sense of quiet and peace and different reality.
Brilliant,
So it's already out there and it's working for many people. But I think it's important to be aware because as a woman told me, I was recently presenting at the Innovation Women speaker series, and the woman from the audience said, I understand that it's all that information is available, it's out there in the Google, and you can dig it up. Yeah. But when you have it all in summary, you understand the scope and the impact it makes on our lives. Right. So she was very thankful that I brought that information together as a summary. And that's what we're trying to do here too.
I agree, because you reminded me of another conversation I had recently speaking, and one of the conversations led to the need and use of data in all of this, that the fact that many of these technologies cannot be implemented or executed if you don't have adequate amounts of data to actually run through an algorithm or a process or a computer program, really. And that's fascinating because for you and I, on this side of the chasm, we know that that's a very critical path of getting some of these technologies be useful to humankind. And I wonder if we should be leading that we should be using that to lead our conversation.
We could, but what I would suggest, I would like to wrap it up as a session for today.